Hey everyone, just a moment. We'll let everyone get into the webinar and we'll start in just a second. All right, hey everyone, welcome to the webinar, Top 10 Ways to Prepare for a Successful Mobile Project Launch. I'm your host, Matt Netko, Product Evangelist at Ionic. You can check me out on all the social media there and LinkedIn. Reach out and connect and let's talk about mobile apps. So really excited to be here today, but first let's go over some housekeeping items. Of course, this webinar is being recorded, so you can always access it at a later time and review it and rewatch it. The presentation is about an hour long, and that includes our Q&A section, so definitely be sure to submit your questions throughout the presentation. We will answer them towards the end, but anything about mobile and the Ionic and anything you want to throw out there, we will get to it. And last, the recording again, slides, demo app I'm going to show today are all available during and after the presentation ends, so feel free to access that at any time. All right, we have an action-packed agenda for today. We're going to give a brief introduction to Ionic in case you're new to us and our company and what we do. Then, of course, dive into the meat of the presentation. We've got a really great, successful mobile project tips. We've got 10 of them for you today. Everything you need to successfully design, build, and launch your mobile project. We'll have a brief overview of the Ionic App Platform, which of course helps you tackle these types of projects and mobile projects. A live demo, and then of course stick around again for the live Q&A. So awesome. So for those of you that are new to Ionic, maybe you're just hearing about us, we are the leading cross-platform developer solution, all about building and enabling developers to build really great web-native type apps using their web development skills. So that's your JavaScript, HTML, CSS, things like that. And so, unsurprisingly, we are a web-first approach, all about using web technologies to do really cool things and build really amazing apps. And we've been around for a number of years now and have the approach that we're talking about here today is clearly resonating because we are now powering over 15% of apps in the app stores. That's Google Play and the Apple App Store, as well as countless progressive web apps out on the World Wide Web. And we've worked with and have a network of over 5 million developers worldwide. All right, that's just a little brief overview of Ionic. Let's get to the presentation. So maybe you're an architect, maybe you're an executive, doesn't matter what your role is, but you've been tasked with a new mobile project that you have to design, build, and launch and get it off the ground successfully. Well, there's a number of concerns that we typically see with this. Of course, maybe this is your first mobile project. Maybe you've built desktop websites or been in a different space and you're just targeting mobile for the first time. Or maybe you've had issues in the past or launches that haven't gone so well. That can be very concerning and, leave you with a lot of different choices to make and hesitation around making sure that it's successful. Not to mention, there's the aspect of potentially hiring mobile developers. How do I go about doing that? What do I actually need to be successful there? And not to mention, when you have them or work with them, what about designing and building for mobile, right? It's a whole different paradigm. You have these devices that we carry around all day, but despite that, actually developing for mobile is very complex and challenging. And then on top of that, what about long-term maintenance and support plans, right? Mobile is something that you always have to be constantly engaged with and making changes to. So there's a lot to think about there. And what we've seen at Ionic working with hundreds of enterprise customers over the years is that unfortunately it takes the average team 7 to 12 months to build an app. So even teams that know what they're doing in the mobile space, it can still take many months to ship something. And in today's landscape, that is a problem. Customers and your clients expect you to go to market quickly and adapt to change really quickly. That is absolutely a requirement these days. So with all that said, how do we ensure a successful mobile project? There's a lot of things to look out for there, and it seems honestly quite scary, right? Well, no worries. We have 10 tips here for developing, building, and launching your app I'm going to present these within the context of 4 phases: planning, development, testing, and deployment and maintenance. Okay, the first phase is planning. So of course, this is where you want to research and design your mobile experience and everything that's involved there from a business perspective before you jump into coding in the development phase. There is some really great stuff that we have to think about before we can get into it. The first item is actually a challenge to you and your team, and that is, do you really need to build a mobile app? Of course, nowadays, everyone thinks you do. Every business thinks that they need a mobile app and that they have to be in the app stores to be successful and to reach new customers. But I actually want to challenge that assumption today and, guide you in a couple different ideas. So one thing that you might do, every company has a desktop website, hopefully mobile enabled website today, but one thing you might do is actually make it more responsive. So that's where you provide different mobile breakpoints that identify and change your design of the site based on the device that's accessing it. So there's things you should do with that to extend it to be more responsive, as well as add mobile capabilities, maybe camera access or Bluetooth or other things that the web provides us today, depending on the experience that you or your company needs. Additionally, you might look at improving search engine optimization. So that is the tactics and tools that bring customers to your sites via search engines and search traffic. So oftentimes, to improve your business goals, it's not so much building a whole separate native app or mobile app. It's about improving discoverability, right? What are the optimizations you can do for the business before you even think about tackling mobile? So definitely start from there. But if you want to, in a similar vein, you can extend and make your desktop site into a progressive web app. And just think of those as websites and web apps that have taken the right vitamins. So what that means is providing, again, a mobile optimized experience based on the device type that's accessing the site, accessing native features that can really augment and improve that experience. And then there's some features like the ability to save the app to the home screen that actually makes it feel like a native mobile app on their screen. And that's where literally the app, your website icon lives right alongside other mobile ones, and your customers can easily access that from their mobile device. So, look into progressive web apps a little outside of this presentation today, but Ionic has tons of materials on our site. Check that out. The next one is, choosing your target platform. So you decided, okay, of course, we're going to go ahead with building that mobile app project. That's fine. But you want to look at, what are your target platforms? So that would include mobile and desktop web, as well as iOS and Android, right? So what we recommend being a web-first company is not ignoring the web. So following that previous advice I mentioned to build a progressive web app, and then taking that and building the iOS and Android versions off of that. And we'll kind of demo that in a little bit. So, why you might want to, of course, build and target a cross-platform approach is you want to be able to reach more customers. That's the obvious reason, right? If you don't have an app store presence, you are likely missing out on customers that are searching from the app stores first, or sometimes even from search engines. And if we think of, why we really want to go for be on both native platforms as well as the web, is that omni-channel user experience that titans of industry like Netflix and Disney are really the standouts there, right? So think about the scenarios these days with consumers and myself as well, any of us. We don't just use any one particular device. We expect, the gold standard of these services are expecting them to follow us across device. So that, and a really quick example is from some of these content media companies would be accessing their service on the train ride into the city, on their handheld iPhone or mobile device. Then you get into work and access it hopefully only during lunchtime, of course. Access it on your laptop or desktop, right? And then at home when you're relaxing, you might have a tablet or be back to that mobile device again. So seamlessly, integrating and using all those devices and platforms is really important. The next one is really fun. So if you're newer to the mobile space, one of the things that we have to think about is the user interface, especially. Very different from a desktop experience. So as we see here on the right with an example of a calendar component, the traditional, you can't just slap a desktop calendar component onto a mobile screen, right? There's things, as we can see, like it's too blown out there on the right in terms of the number of functionality we're trying to offer, that grid view. It doesn't really work. How are users going to be able to touch that and interact with it, especially on a much smaller screen? So we see in the iOS example here a much more zoomed in view, much more clear and focused type of design that allows a user to choose the date and time. So that's one big aspect that we have to think about for our design, is the touch versus mouse experience. Of course, using a mouse with point and click capabilities on desktop is way different than touch on a much smaller device form factor. The other aspect I mentioned is responsive content, and that's essentially what this calendar is doing too, is being able to adapt to that device form factor and screen sizes to provide great experiences based on whatever the user's using. We've all used sites and other apps that have not been optimized for this, and it can be incredibly painful, if not impossible, to use a service if they do not optimize and become responsive. The last aspect is accessibility. So you have users with various needs that want to be able to access your site and your native apps, and there's integrated services like TalkBack and other voice activation features for blind users as well that we can take advantage of on mobile that are a little bit different in terms of form factor and usage on desktop. And if your team is new to the mobile space, I recommend spending some time researching mobile and UI and UX design, right? And what I really recommend is starting by reviewing your favorite apps on your phone. What do you use every day? But look at them from a different perspective. Take a fresh look at them from the UI and UX experience angle, and with your team, have everyone document and write down what they like and dislike from those apps, and then apply over time as you get into development, apply those findings to your particular app. So that's something that we've had our customers do and to great success. Additionally, if you're newer to mobile, the official Apple and Google guidelines that are on their sites are really handy. They offer all different types of best practices that you do have to follow, and they do reinforce those in the App Store reviews, but they're also just helpful for understanding and learning UI paradigms when you're not a designer, which I certainly am not, right? Most of us are not, and we have to spend some time learning those things. But of course, the next tip, and what we're probably not surprised to hear us saying, is we recommend using a mobile-ready UI component library. These are the types of libraries that will take care of a lot of these built-in best practices for you because they are built-in, and they have some great defaults and assumptions that your development team can use out of the box. Speaking of mobile UI component toolkits, there of course is many web-based ones that we like. There's Ionic Framework, which I'll talk about in a little bit. Progress Software has some really good ones. And then there's lots of other JavaScript framework options and toolkits out there. There's just endless amounts of them, endless amounts of design systems and other things that are available for mobile to UI, mobile UI component toolkits, right? Additionally, for the more native mobile front, you do have the stock iOS and Android native components that you can use. These are really out of the box and designed by Apple and Google, so those are good options. Sometimes they may or may not have some flexibility to them, what you want, and then that means you might have to turn to custom native development, which means you need native developers for that, but you're able to really build more complex components and different workflows, things like that. All right, the next phase is development. The most fun part of it, in my opinion, of course, is actually building out the core functionality of your new mobile app. All right, well, we kind of touched upon this on a little bit fashion of this web versus native aspect. So the first step we need to do before we get into coding is picking your approach, right? There's the native approach where you're building with Objective-C and Swift on iOS, or Kotlin or Java on Android. And really, there's some good benefits here. It is the dedicated experience and the most performant, assuming well-written code, of course, because these are the tools, programming languages, etc., that Apple and Google provided for their specific runtimes, aka iOS and Android. However, there's some drawbacks, of course. It is a specialized skill set. You'd need iOS and Android engineers. And unfortunately, because the code is built and dedicated for those dedicated platforms, you don't have automatic code sharing out of the box. So you're rewriting features multiple times to fit that platform paradigm. As a result, you have a lengthier time to market because you have to align teams from web, desktop, and whatnot, assuming there's that component, as well as the Android and iOS teams, and make sure that you're shipping features in a similar timed cadence. So as a result, it can be hard to justify. It really depends on if all those things are something that are concerning to you, then we really recommend the cross-platform approach, which is based on the web as well as the web-first approach there. So here you're using the familiar languages that your web development team, which every business these days has a web development team, you're using the familiar languages of the web, HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, to bring an experience that can run on the web as well as native mobile. So really the best of both worlds there. And from a cost savings, increased time to market perspective, you're able to write the code once and then run it anywhere. So basically anywhere there's a web browser, right? All right. The next aspect is data access and integration. So once you've picked your approach, you now have to look at your data, because at the end of the day, all mobile applications especially are going to interact with data and manipulate it, gather it up, make changes. That's really what most of our apps are all about. So start with gathering internally, a checklist of what type of data are you going to need in your mobile app. And that can involve a cross-functional effort between IT and other different groups that maintains that, depending on your company size, right? So think about what that is and get a checklist going there. Once you know what data you need, you're going to need to figure out how to access it. So there's a few different options here. There might be software development kits or SDKs that you can use that sit on top of the existing data platforms, so databases, APIs, things like that. Or you might have to build new APIs to access that data, which can take time, but may very well be worth it if you don't have a third-party SDK ready out of the box for you. Additionally, when you're thinking about accessing data, there might be private internal databases that really have not been exposed to the outside world, aka mobile in this case, and you need to again, write an API or find a way to work with your teams to expose that and get that data mobile friendly, so to speak. And then, of course, you might have, for any new data or data that's going to be specific to mobile, you might pick a cloud-based solution. So that's your AWS, Azure, and Google are the big three. You might have the on-premise approach. So that's where the servers and the data lives within your network, or the cloud providers, which is those big three. And it depends on really your data compliance and security needs, whether or not your IT team and security teams are going to be comfortable with that. So lots of things to think about from the data access side. And there's some more when it comes to integration options. So when we're actually getting into the nitty-gritty here, we've got some different formats that the data might be coming from and different access options. So Beyond your classic databases and APIs, that's what these formats are really all about. So one of them is content management systems. This is increasingly becoming one of my favorites. And what this is your data, if you're working on a marketing team or customer success team, really any team that might be building websites or all different types of internal tools, they might live in content management systems. And so, of course, examples are classic as WordPress, typically used for blogging. But then there's some newcomers in the what's called headless CMS space, like Prismic, that basically allow you to teams of internal teams across your company to manage data and create it, but then the headless term means that it's accessed over an API instead of a UI like a WordPress type system. And the benefit there is it allows these different teams to make updates really quickly, fix everything from like fixing spelling mistakes to rolling out new marketing pages. It's really powerful. And we at Ionic actually use Prismic to power our resource center. Ionic.io/resources. Definitely check that out. And that allows us to roll out new articles, new webinar landing pages, like for this one, and video. Oh my gosh, all different types of things. So really powerful solution. That might be something you integrate with. The next format is more of your legacy data access. So depending on the history of your company, you might have Excel spreadsheets lying around that has data you want to expose in the mobile app, or Microsoft Access databases. These are perfectly fine to work with. They have APIs and other services like Airtable and others that recreate those database experiences for access. Really, the sky's the limit in terms of all those different formats you can integrate with. And last is, of course, your cloud providers. Again, AWS, Azure, and Google. They have the ability to work with these legacy formats or create and integrate with new services. Really, hundreds and thousands available out there. A special call out here within data access and that kind of integration functionality are the mobile backend as a service offerings. And what this basically is allows you to stand up common services, common functionality that a mobile app would need. That includes authentication, storing data, there we go again, data storage, creating and managing APIs really quickly around that data, pub sub notifications, push notifications, of course, on mobile are very popular, and then even some solutions around artificial intelligence and machine learning. Within the Ionic community, for example, AWS Amplify and Firebase are very popular. These offer, especially for front-end web developers that are maybe don't have as much experience with back-end database and API solutions and all these other offerings. These make it really easy to spin those services up for fast prototyping. They're great for startups to mid-sized companies. And then, of course, I have to mention Microsoft Azure has different mobile offerings. So a lot of these overlap in terms of functionality. I recommend really any of those three. All right, next we need to think about data, the security of our data and our user privacy and things like that. I really recommend during the development process, not post-development, not post-launch for sure, making sure security is thought about throughout the entire app development process. And why that is we really just have to turn to the news these days. With all the data breaches that come out, unfortunately, month over month, you have companies and brands that are damaged and consumer trust is lost because data was leaked or not properly secured. So here's some things that we need to think about in that space of security. One thing is encryption. So that is the securing of the data either at rest, meaning on the device, and especially on mobile, that needs to definitely occur, or in transit with HTTPS API calls and things like that. So we'll look at a couple, one of Ionic's solutions in a minute that does that for us. And additionally, with the on-device encryption and securing our data in the mobile app, we have biometrics. So that's your Face ID, fingerprint scanning type of solutions. These are really unique to mobile. and something that we should definitely use, really regardless of the type of sensitivity of the data that we're storing. It really quickly becomes, most consumer data and customer data becomes personal and PII really quickly, so it's great to use these mobile-specific services to secure them. Next, we have single sign-on solutions. So this is where you're able to use a corporate account, username and password, the same one for all different types of services, including your mobile app. There's lots of, you can create this yourself, but this is one where I recommend using a third party because the specification and how you actually implement this gets really complicated and easy to get wrong. So we have, fan favorites like Auth0, Ping Federate, Okta, AWS has their solutions. Basically every cloud provider has their own as well. But that's something that you'll want to integrate in an app. And then last is enterprise app distribution. So while we all know that the App Store and Google Play, the public facing app stores, you may or may not know that you can actually host a private app store for your company that only your employees can access. So if you are building a mobile app that really doesn't need to be exposed to the world, it's just for your company, Apple and Google have enterprise app store distribution options there. So definitely look into that. Along those same lines, you may have heard of mobile device management solutions, which is way outside the scope of this talk, but basically the idea here is securing your applications on the device and enabling your IT team and company to manage those devices. In the case of data breaches or an employee leaving, you have options to wipe the device remotely, or if not so much maybe even if the employee is leaving, but if the device is stolen, you're able to wipe it so that you secure any of that sensitive data. So definitely more for an enterprise situation, but really great and popular options are MDMs. So check those out. All right, the testing phase, right? This is, you've built the app, you're ready to get it ready for launch, but you definitely need to have and validate that the app's user experience and UI is looking and performing great, right? Before we put it out into the world. So of course, I recommend that you test the app. That's not a surprise probably, right? But what does this actually mean? Well, there's two parts to this. There's code tests and device testing as well. So the code tests are, really what your development team hopefully has been setting up throughout the development process. This is where you have unit tests, integration tests, and then even options for end-to-end UI testing to ensure that, pieces of your app's functionality are working like they should. And then over time, as you make changes, you can catch regressions, fix bugs, and write tests for them as you find them, and really just harden your app's security as well as just the performance and quality of the application. Next, there's device testing. So something that's kind of unique to mobile is while you can run simulators and other things, if you're building a web-based app, you can run and test a lot of it in a web browser. At the end of the day, you need to test various devices to make sure that it's running well and performing well, as well as checking native device features that only can be run on those devices, like the camera, Bluetooth, geolocation, stuff like that. So you have a couple options. I recommend buying a variety of devices for your development and QA teams to test on. Of course, it really varies in terms of the number and the types of devices you need. We recommend, really just several of the latest devices, and go back a ways to include lower performing and lower end devices as well, so that if your customers are using those, then you don't leave them behind from a performance standpoint. Of course, this can be expensive though, and maintaining those, and if you have a very large dev team, hundreds of thousands of devs, that really might not make sense to buy all of them devices, right? So there are automated services out there, such as AWS's Device Farm, that hosts those devices in the cloud. And these are really cool services, especially theirs, where you can hook them up into your deployment processes, where you're deploying that app in the cloud to and running them on potentially hundreds of device tests. So they maintain and keep those physical devices up to date. You just tap into those powers, spin up a test, for UI and end-to-end things like that, and integration tests, and then you're not having to manage those costs or audit them, maintain them over time. So really great option there. The last part of device testing is you might want to try some beta testing with your customer insiders or anyone in the public as part of your community or ecosystem. And there's a couple options there. So Apple has their test flight service, and Google has Google Beta Tracks and other alpha, beta, and production testing. And I highly recommend these. Basically how they work is you upload the app, you deploy it as you typically would, but instead of putting it on the production app store, you can put them into special channels for these beta tests, and then they access them through a URL and then install them on their device, and they can even give feedback privately to you, and then you can make changes. So highly recommend that as a separate phase of testing to make sure that you're ironing out all the major bugs and things like that. And of course, another benefit from using their customers is they're going to have a wide variety of devices to test on. So you'd be surprised what they're able to find before you launch the app. So definitely check out the beta testing. Next thing is, you're going to test, of course, between code and manual and automated device testing. But, later when the app is live, you're going to, the reality is with software, you're not going to find every issue out there. There's always going to be bugs in anyone's software. So how we mitigate that is by establishing monitoring and analytics services within your mobile application. And what these allow you to do is lots of great things like reviewing your user behavior and then responding and fixing issues quickly. So on the monitoring side with your Sentry, LogRocket, Bugsnag, all these other providers, they allow you to actually recreate the steps that users took when they triggered a device crash or an app crash or a weird UI bug or something like that. And your developers get, step-by-step access and replay video capability to walk through what users did. So really incredible, innovative services there that we recommend, especially if you're really putting quality at the forefront and want to make sure that you are serving customers well. I recommend these. And then, of course, from the analytics side, there's services, of course, like Google Analytics and tons more that allow you to track more of your user behavior, see what features are performing well, which ones are most popular, and then you can, of course, make product adjustments based on those lessons learned and other things like that. All right, next step, last step, right? Deployment, delivering, updating, and monitoring your app over time. This is where it all comes together. You've decided on your app approach, you've built it up, you've tested it, and you're ready to share it with the world. So this is the launch and distribute the app phase. There's really two parts of this, the App Store listings and the launch coordination, right? So first, you've got the native app built and tested. There's still, unfortunately, some more work to be done, right? That last mile kind of work. And that's the App Store listing. So there's a couple parts of this. The first part is, all of the copy, the marketing copy, like everything from the name, version number, description, how to use the app, all those different types of details need to be written up and approved and added to the listing. And then you have screenshots from the app. We've got Swerkit here, one of built with Ionic technology. That's a great example of this. They have these beautiful screenshots with like simple descriptions of how they're enticing users to download it, right, is essentially the goal. You can also add video. So there's lots of different types of things that you'll probably want to work with your marketing team to create and coordinate on there. And then, of course, the app binary, the native app itself, has to be approved by Apple and Google. And that can take anywhere from a day or two to several weeks, depending on that approval process. One thing I like to call out is some real world advice, having been through it myself and in our teams working with customers, is Google is really straightforward and more or less easy to get through from that perspective. They do some manual testing, and then it's pretty much you're on the store. It's really nice. But I wanted to call out a special mention to Apple's rejections. Apple takes quality to a next level experience, which their customers love. I love it too. They're really hesitant about spam apps and other types of low quality apps and making sure those don't get on the App Store in the first place. However, that means especially if it's a first-time app launch, they scrutinize very heavily. So you'll want to make sure that you understand those design best practices. You're going to want to make sure that you give yourself, I would say, several weeks ahead of your launch date to make sure that if you have rejections, you have enough time to send them back to the dev team, make changes, and then resubmit, because you have to resubmit and then go through the whole process again. And that can be, a challenging situation. And you want to make sure that you're not delayed when you have so much at stake for this launch by Apple or really any other factors, right? It's not just Apple that we want to call out there. So let's say you do get approved, you've got the App Store listing, you're ready to launch. So you're going to want to coordinate that. So just because your app is approved doesn't mean that it has to launch right away. You can actually control when it goes out into the public. You can set a date in the future. And so you're going to want to work with marketing on all different types of collateral, because of course your company's website has to be updated. Maybe you're building product pages, social media, webinars like this one to promote it, all sorts of things. And then of course cross-team coordination, like making sure your customer success team is aware of it. Maybe your sales team knows that this new product's going to come to market. All those types of concerns that are internal to you and your company. And then the last step is, of course, once it's live, your work's not done, especially on mobile, right? You want to ensure that if you want to ensure that your project remains successful, you have to think about updates and maintenance over time on mobile. So a couple ways we look at this that I recommend are setting up a CI/CD system. So that's continuous integration, continuous delivery, and that's the type of solutions that allow you to increase your speed of development to ship features to market really quickly. Some of those, so that's really standard these days of more and more. Your developers will know more about setting that up, and I'm going to show off Ionic in just a second. And that might include live updates, which are features that Ionic offers with AppFlow that allow you to push and deploy new branding changes, bug fixes, A/B tests, things like that. They allow you to push those right to the app users, bypassing that long App Store review process, which is really powerful, or even deploying to the app stores all from code commits. So you're able to kind of automate that process and move even faster than that initial first-time setup and launch. Next on the, some advice around the customer feedback engagement kind of phase. So one thing that you want to make sure you're staying on top of is of course, responding to App Store reviews quickly. So as a company or an individual, you're able to respond to App Store reviews these days. And I recommend that you really try to monitor them and respond within like 12 to 24 hours while that review is still top of mind in that app user's mind. Because if you're able to respond, and if it's something like an issue or they're upset, if you're able to respond quickly, there's a higher likelihood of them changing that star rating as well as that review to be more favorable, right? And it's just good, establishes trust for you and your company, and shows that you're responsive if you're replying quickly. Additionally, of course, whether that is the support team replying or your dev team, you're going to want to enable the support team to understand the app's ins and outs and make sure they're trained up on it and how to use it and how to interact with customers. I also recommend setting up a dedicated email for the app, so maybe myapp@companyname.com, that is then used within the app for support access and things like that, because then when you get folks emailing in, you know exactly what app they're talking about. That'll help save a lot of the confusion and time to figure out what that issue is. And then last, of course, your development team has to stay on the ball and fix issues as quickly as possible and ship those really quickly to your app users. And of course, there's thousands of apps released onto the app stores every year. So standing out is getting increasingly harder and harder. So you're going to want to run, ongoing marketing campaigns, promotional efforts, social media to keep that app in the mind of your customers or new potential customers. All right. So we're going to do, that's really the top 10 tips there. We're going to take a look next at Ionic and really do a brief walkthrough of our app platform and a live demo. Really excited to show that off. And we'll talk about how this all fits into, those top 10 mobile tips. So the first aspect of our platform, really what we're most known for, is Ionic Framework, which is our set of 100 plus UI component toolkits. You remember I mentioned using one of these out of the box to really speed up your development time and provide a great UI and UX. So you can use that to build one code base and deploy it as a PWA, Android, and iOS. And we also have a cross-platform native runtime capacitor, which is the tool essentially that allows you to take your web-based code and deploy it to iOS and Android and other platforms like that. And you have full native access and performance. So just because you're building with web technology doesn't mean you have to sacrifice on native features with like camera, Bluetooth, I think I said geolocation, push notifications. All of that is possible with the Ionic App Platform. And again, as I mentioned, we have supported native integrations. So lots of third-party companies build out SDKs and integrations for Ionic. And you have easy access to native features that you really don't have to make a compromise if you're building with the web-first approach. And we have reliable plugins, which are those SDKs that allow you to access native features that are supported and maintained by the Ionic team. All right, next we've got, we've really take a look at this from a build, secure, and then deliver mobile app kind of standpoint. The Ionic team has advanced security and storage options for commercial and enterprise businesses that are really looking to, make sure that their apps stay secure and all that type of thing there. So we've got secure user authentication. I mentioned single sign-on as part of that. Biometrics like your Face ID and fingerprint scanning, and then military-grade AES 256 encrypted storage as well. I'm going to show that off in a demo in a second. Within these, we have 3 different solutions these days that offer those types of security features. The first one is Identity Vault, which offers that biometric authentication. So what's really great is you can integrate this into your app in just a few minutes and add that Face ID and fingerprint scanning, encrypted storage in the keychain, all these different types of things that are really challenging to get right on mobile, especially across different operating systems. Next up, we have AuthConnect, which makes single sign-on so much easier than building it yourself. We integrate with lots and lots of popular authentication providers like Ping, Auth0, AWS, and Azure. There's so much more than that. And it provides a single API and easy workflow for authenticating and logging your users into your mobile app. And then last, that kind of brings this whole native solutions together is Secure Storage. One of our newer solutions allows you to deliver secure and reliable data-driven apps. And what this essentially is a powerful local database that allows you to encrypt, store, and access data both online and offline across all mobile platforms. So really cool stuff. The last part is delivery. So I mentioned, we recommend heavily once you launch that app to set up a CI/CD solution. And for us on our platform, we've got AppFlow, which is a mobile CI/CD solution, incredibly dedicated just for mobile. So using all of our expertise to make that experience really great for development teams, especially teams that are not used to setting up CI/CD solutions. This takes care of all the hard parts for you. So we have the ability to build your native apps in the cloud all for you, managing your certificates, all the complicated steps there. Publish directly to app stores, which is my favorite feature, really just from code commit, one line, one push all the way down to the app stores. I mentioned those live updates in real time that lets you fix bug fixes, make branding changes, color changes, all these different types of things, bypassing the App Store review process. And then we integrate with all these different Git-based services like GitHub, Bitbucket, and GitLab. So I'm going to show kind of what that looks like in a second. And last, and this is really the Ionic difference, is we are a company entirely dedicated to the mobile space and building that web-first approach, web-native apps as we call them. So one thing that we have that's different from other companies is we have expert services and support. So if you, everything from building your app, development strategies like I mentioned here today, to troubleshooting and guidance, whether you're in the development phase or post-launch, doesn't matter. We do architecture reviews and perform security and performance audits in your app and provide detailed recommendations that your teams can use. And we, as I mentioned, we've been around a number of years now, and we are now supporting and working with hundreds of popular brands here, all of them using our complete Ionic App Platform suite of products and services. All right, so let's get to the fun part here. This is the demo. I want to show off all of the Ionic App Platform. So what I have here is our app is kind of an enterprise reference app called Ionifits, which is just a play on Zenefits, one of the human resources and expense management providers for companies. And what this is a progressive web app, iOS and Android app, all built using the same code base. So what I recommend if you want to play along, pull out your device camera and scan the QR code here. That will open up the Ionifits PWA, and you can play along as I go through the demo or access it later. To actually sign into the app, I'm going to show this in a second, but use user@test.com and password Ionic. And I'll show this all these details later in a little bit too. So that's a way to show our single sign-on app flow with AuthConnect. Additionally, the app is open source, so check out the code on GitHub, and you can kind of go through everything that I'll talk about today. So let's hop out of here and show some code. All right. Okay. So on the left here, I have Visual Studio Code open with the Ionifits code base, and then on the right is my Ionifits app running on my iPhone device. It's actually running on the device. Okay, and let's take a look at first our login page. So as you can see, this is using the Ionic Framework, that library of over 100 UI toolkit components. These are built and optimized for iOS and Android. So all the animations, gestures, and typical components you'd see are provided for you out of the box. You'll notice here, like I have just an image for the Ionifits logo that looks really nice. And then the card for the welcome login box here is just an Ion card. So all of our components start with Ion and then whatever the name is. And so you see that we've got just the part of the card is providing the header title there, and then a couple buttons, Ion buttons that'll help us log in, and so just some styling. So again, it's all just HTML, CSS, and JavaScript to build a great looking app, and really very little code to build a nice looking login page there. So I'm going to actually log in on the device here. I'm going to tap login, and what this does is this is opening. I happen to be using Auth0 to sign in, and I'm going to do that here. So user@test.com, and then password Ionic. You can do this on your device too, and hit return. Awesome. So seamless integration with single sign-on within seconds, really. So let's break down what actually happened there, right? Because that happened rather quickly. So what I'm doing is, again, I'm using our AuthConnect product, which makes this really simple to add SSO into your app. And I have an authentication service. So this is an Ionic Angular app This happens to be Angular, but we work with React, Vue, and really vanilla JavaScript, anything that you want for the web. And what I'm doing is, just a common best practice of wrapping my authentication behind a service class for testability and maintainability. And I'm just extending the AuthConnect class here to, perform the SSO. And really what's happening is, as you saw, I tap that login button and I'm calling AuthConnect's login function that opens that window and allows me to log in. And at the end of the day, there's really not that much code to integrate this. This login success event is fired once I logged in successfully. And here I'm just saying, navigate me to the employee screen, which is what we're seeing right here. So there's a couple other little UI details, but that's about it. And how I configure this is actually, in this case, being an Angular app, I'm using environments and I have my configuration. And what happens is this config, depending on if it's running on native or mobile, native, mobile, or web, it's choosing the right configuration. I have a web config here too, because there's slightly different variables there. And then what happens is in the constructor, we're picking the configuration to run. So we're using the capacitor helper function is native platform to decide, hey, if we're running on mobile, use the native mobile config. Otherwise, use the web one. And then, configure that with AuthConnect there. Pass that over to them. And you'll see there's just a few details really to set this up. I'm using Auth0 as my provider. I'm running on capacitor. We also have work with Cordova. And then the rest of these details are client keys, things like that, and then redirect URIs that help us navigate and set up the SSO experience. So that's really all there is to it. And then the web one is slightly different, Auth0 web, and basically a lot of the same details there. Okay, next we have the employee page. So that's what I'm on here. And this I want to show off more of the Ionic Framework experience and what this gives to you. So here we have, let's see, we just have an Ion content element, which basically contains all of the user data. And what this does is, this is a high performance scrolling, kind of showing off the performance of web native based apps. So when I scroll through this, you'll see how buttery smooth that is, right? Really cool. And then check out some of the details that are really worth mentioning are, again, this is just a list component that displaying all the users, and I'm looping through my employee array here to output them to the screen. I've got an avatar, which is, the little faces here with an image, and then the rest of it is just regular HTML again for the, first name, last name, and title. And some of the magic here that, again, Ionic Framework brings to you out of the box is, notice when I tap on a particular entry, look at the top with the back button as I go back, how that people designation kind of slides in and out, that those animations and gestures, right? Along with, if we look at how the people designation slides up as I scroll down, things like that. And then I also have nice components like my information button at the top that kind of slides up and down, and I can really quickly show off what components are used there. So that's something that Ionic Framework gives you out of the box is, and why we recommend reaching for a mobile UI component toolkit is because those animations and gestures on mobile are really hard to get right. And at the end of the day, you want to focus on the unique business features that you have to build, not on recreating the mobile experience. So that's something that Ionic brings you out of the box. And as you can see, I'm not doing anything with gestures or animations. It's just wiring up the data and displaying it on the screen. So really powerful stuff. Next up, I want to show some expense services. So let's say that I'm traveling for work and I have some expenses like some coffee I bought this morning, and I want to be reimbursed for that, but my company of course requires that I submit a receipt. So I can't just get away with claiming any old money amount that I want, right? We have to approve it. So we're going to use the expense management solution here. So I'm going to tap that. And again, showing off more of our UI components. Let's look at how this kind of works under the hood. So I'm going to type in a merchant name. So maybe Starbucks, and I spent, $8.14 today. Category, let's say it's travel meals, right? And then the important thing is I actually need to submit that receipt to be reimbursed, right? So what this is going to do is actually use the native camera, and here we are. So I'll take a picture of that, right? Cool. All right, and then you see the receipt is uploaded on there. So let's pause and kind of take a look at what's actually happening. So I once again have a service class that represents the native interactions, in this case working with the camera and storage to store it on device. And the one to really function to look at is the capturing expense receipt one that fired when I clicked the camera. And what this is doing is it's using the capacitor camera API to open up the device camera and capture a photo. And one of the things, there's just one line to do that here. And one thing I want to point out is there's nothing that is specifying the web, Android, iOS, no branching code logic for this. It's just one API that runs seamlessly on any platform. And all those native details are abstracted away from me as the web developer. So really neat stuff. All I'm doing is providing some configuration options, and then it gives me that expense data, right? And what's really neat is sometimes when you're running between web or mobile, sometimes you do actually need to change some of your logic. And so we have that option too. You do have that open ability. So that's what I'm kind of doing to get the receipt path where that's stored is slightly different. So I'm again using some logic to say if it's running on mobile, use this particular variable. Otherwise, if it's on web, do something else. So all of that is the power of the Ionic platform at play and how we tap into the native experience. And then I can over here add it, right? And we're good to go, right? Okay, so let's look at storage next. So I want to, we have not only these expenses, but the employees, right? I want to be able to secure that on my device because this is an app that my employees are going to go out into the world and use. And again, what if their devices are lost or stolen? Maybe, any kind of situation could happen. So again, using a storage service, I'm using our secure storage solution to encrypt that data on device, and specifically the expense data. And how this works is it's essentially a SQLite database that can be encrypted and stored in a file-based kind of experience there. So what I'm doing here is first I'm obtaining an encryption key. More on that in a second. I'm getting an encryption key using the SQLite API here to create a database to store the expenses, right? And then passing that encryption key in there. And that's it for the encryption side. What's cool is anytime I perform any operation from here on out, all that data will be stored encrypted at rest for me. Other steps to point out is I'm creating an expense table to store that data. And then further down, when I actually create an expense, running more SQL to add that data. And all this is encrypted at rest, which is really cool. Next up, let's look at some identity options. So, we've encrypted the data, but what if I want to take that a step further with biometrics and things like that? So, again, I am logged into the app. You can see as John Smith here from Auth0. So once I'm authenticated, we have some really neat options. So one of those is, the Face ID experience and hiding the screen on the background. So I'm going to, get rid of the app here and then relaunch it. And you'll see this happen quickly. Whoop, look at that. Use my face to sign in. That was Face ID. And to do that, we're using Ionic's Identity Vault service, also wrapped behind a service class here. And really to trigger that is just this unlock on access single variable that integrates the Face ID functionality. I didn't have to learn how to program that at all, and it's all part of the solution really easily and really native. And then additionally, from another variable, we can say hide the screen on background, because what if I'm at the airport and I'm logging my expenses. I don't want someone to look over my shoulder and, access my employee phone numbers, or again, see what I'm purchasing and whatnot. So if I do this slowly, if I put this in the background, you'll see my clock app, or I have other apps open, but this hides the screen into the background. And as I, of course, tap back in, it comes back and things like that. So really powerful, biometrics features that enables. The last aspect to mention is that this does is it also has the ability to store encrypted at rest smaller bits of data in the device keychain, which is the most secure portion of the mobile device on iOS and Android. And so you remember from our storage service that we said when we were configuring our database, we want to get an encryption key and use that. And so we think about, if we don't, we need to secure that encryption key as well as the data itself. If that encryption key is exposed, then it doesn't matter that we're encrypting this database, right? Because if you can access it, you gain access to to that data. So what we're doing is we're using Identity Vault's key value API to store that key, that encryption key, securely on device, and then pulling it out for the storage service. And what this is doing is we actually have yet another service, a key service, that will generate and give me the encryption key for that particular app user and generates it uniquely on the fly just the first time after I've signed into the app. So there's lots of strategies for how you might obtain an encryption key. This is generated, uniquely, just a GUID with a simple algorithm here to do that. You could also have it come from the cloud, from an API that you maintain and a different database there. But essentially all this does is it retrieves it and then stores it into the vault securely. And again, that's all taken care of for me. I know that I have a complete end-to-end solution there where both my employee and expense data is secure. So really cool stuff. Next, we want to look at the portion that we talked about, mobile CI/CD, right? And that would be our app flow service. So if we come back over here, we don't have a ton of time to cover the whole app flow suite, but again, what this allows us to do is to set up, working as a team on a mobile app, the ability to ship all different types of updates to iOS and Android in an automated fashion, saving your team lots of time and headaches and things like that. So we have our commits list, and what's really great is everything that gets committed on different branches comes in here, and then from there we're able to build the native mobile versions of our app, right? So we can choose the target platform, Android, and then we can do web previews as well, or live updates. The type of technology and build stack that with all the CLI and other details that we're going to use to build the app. And then the development type. So the build type, we can do ad hoc, development builds, enterprise builds, and things like that. So I won't build that just now. But when we look at our build screen, we see all of the last deployments built for Android or iOS or web, easily trackable and maintainable as a team. And then you can actually download the native binaries if you want and send those out for testing. Probably the coolest feature, though, that I mentioned is the deploy to app stores feature. So we have the ability to automate from code commit all the way to the app store, building the native mobile app and then sending it to the app store. So here's a couple of my automations. So I have one for the Apple App Store and then Google Play. And how this works is, we're committing to the main branch once our changes are approved, and then I have a special production branch that is manually managed. And once we're ready to cut a release and deploy it, to customers, we'll actually merge into this production branch, right? And let's look at these details and how this is set up. If I edit it. So just a few configuration options, and I get this one-to-one or end-to-end deployment process. So I'm pointing to the production Git branch. I'm targeting iOS. I'm using the latest and greatest tech to build it every time. I'm using my production signing certificates, another thing that we help you manage and take the headache out of that. Production environment variables, because again, from the Auth0 side or other types of configuration, we have full control over that. And then we're saying for the destination, yeah, deploy that to the App Store, right? Send that to the App Store destination. So with all that run, as soon as I commit to the production branch, we're all set. It's going all the way to the App Store. So that is our demo, kind of an end-to-end look at the Ionic App Platform. Hope you enjoyed it, and definitely check out, scan this QR code. I'll put it up at the end here, and you can always access the code and the app at a later time. So coming back to our 10 tips checklist, where does the Ionic App Platform stand? Where do we stand in terms of all these different tips? And I'm happy to report that we really hit all of them except for monitoring and analytics. That's something we don't have today, but we recommend any of those other vendors I pointed out. But again, with Ionic, you're able to build apps that run on the web and mobile together, so the best of both worlds. Deploy them on desktop or mobile web, iOS and Android, right? From a mobile readiness standpoint, you have the Ionic Framework, which gives you those great UI and UX out of the box. So you tick that box, right? And then, of course, when you look at, are we choosing native or cross-platform? Well, we kind of look at this as a cross-platform web native approach, which means you're getting the best of both worlds. It is, you're using web technologies to build native mobile apps. And these are apps that go into the app stores, and your customers and users, to them, it's still a native mobile app because it is. It's still that same experience, and how they access it doesn't change. We integrate with everything, as we saw. I gave a couple examples using camera and storage, biometrics options. We can protect and secure your sensitive data, encrypt it at rest, and also do things like single sign-on. Easy device testing. I'm just connected to over USB locally here, but of course check out all those other suites of automated tests, and the beta testing is important too. There's external companies and other things that we recommend for monitoring analytics, as I said. And then again, from a launch and CI/CD perspective, we've got AppFlow with a special call out to the Deploy to App Store feature, which is incredibly powerful. I use it all the time with the Ionifits app to build these demos and use them on these webinars. So when it comes to maintaining and updating your app, AppFlow is the one you want. All right, last kind of note here is, why Ionic at the end of the day? If we could summarize the benefits of using the Ionic App Platform, you get to use the talent you already have. You have a web development team today, and so why not tap into not only that team, but the massive talent pool that exists worldwide? There's actually 10x more web devs than native mobile devs available, so why not get the best of both worlds, help your web teams extend their skills, which is great for their careers and your business, right? It's just simply a win-win. Additionally, you can deploy anywhere. You can build stunning apps based on commonly used technologies, the best-in-class tech to reach customers and build really cool customer experiences. And finally, what everyone on the business side loves to hear, cost savings, right? So you have at least 20% savings building web native apps compared to your traditional pure native iOS and Android apps, because you get one code base and can deploy to many platforms, more than just mobile native, right? So, all right, with that, I'm going to turn it over to our Q&A section. So I hope you've been leaving lots of great questions for us. Let's take a look at that.